Well, well, well. How the turntables?
I knew CULTIC was going to be good, but I had no idea it was going to be this good. CULTIC has completely blown my expectations out of the water with its Chapter 1 release. I played the demo many months ago and I assumed that would be pretty much what we would be getting, but to my surprise, CULTIC has expanded on everything it brought us in the demo and matured into its own identity by bringing us a unique and engaging narrative that drives the player forward with its mystery and lore. The combat is a refreshing change from the typical fast-paced boomer shooters that can often be too stimulating for some people with their copious amounts of gore, enemy types, enemy weak points, and huge arsenal. CULTIC opts for the more tactical approach to combat where every decision almost feels deliberate by offering you multiple ways to approach an encounter. These fights can range from small and dangerous by suffocating you in tight spaces, or encouraging you to experiment by giving you wide open arenas with different paths and angles. CULTIC does a near perfect job at blending the old school feel with a healthy mix of modern fluidity when it comes to its gunplay, mechanics, atmosphere, its world building and story that really make for a unique and memorable experience which I think deserves your attention. I love it when these indie developers bring their passion projects to life for all of us to enjoy, and the fact that CULTIC was a solo project makes it even more incredible. And that's what this channel is all about. I want to bring more eyes to some of the best indie games out there, so make sure to subscribe if that's what you're into, and if you enjoy the video, please leave a like, it really does help me out a lot. Anyway, on with the video. CULTIC's story is packed to the brim with mystery and tension. Although it can seem kind of corny and vague to begin with, there are plenty of ways the game expands on its lore that gives it more personality and depth by leaving us notepads and markings around the world that clue us in on what's happening. Every arena has a purpose and its own aesthetic, and what I mean by that is these aren't just copy and pasted arenas that are littered with props and objects that serve no purpose. Every building, every vehicle or campsite feels deliberately placed and offers value to the narrative, and is a perfect example of good world building. Without spoiling anything, at the beginning of the game you're shown an opening cutscene that briefly tells you the plot of the game. You're a detective that's working on a case of multiple murders that are plaguing the town of New Grandwell, but after some allegations of misconduct, your character is removed from the case, only for him to pursue it anyway, unbeknownst to anyone. Upon arriving at the scene, you quickly get one-tapped and are thrown into a pile of bodies. And this is where the game begins. CULTIC wastes no time throwing you into combat. About 0.2 of a second after exiting the pit you were just thrown into, you find a hatchet and begin to slice and dice your way through the cultists to find your first weapon. The first weapon you find is the pistol, but this isn't your standard handgun that becomes redundant once you find other weapons. This thing remains useful throughout the entirety of the game, and in my opinion it may be a little too strong, especially when you upgrade it. The way you upgrade your weapons is by exploring and finding weapon parts that are used at the workbenches scattered around the levels, and each weapon has a total of 4 upgrades that vary in cost depending on how strong the upgrade is. These upgrades are pretty standard, so you can add a larger magazine, more damage, more accuracy, yada yada yada. Pretty straightforward. And the pistol gets extremely strong very quickly and is super satisfying to use, especially if you aim for the head all the time. But the great thing about CULTIC's arsenal is that even though the pistol is borderline OP, the other weapons all serve a purpose and never become redundant. They all have their strengths and weaknesses, and you'll quickly adjust to use the appropriate weapon in the correct situation. So for example, the double barrel shotgun obviously obliterates anything in close range. The lever action is an incredibly powerful medium to long range weapon, although I did find myself being starved on ammo for it a lot. The Sten SMG with its 50 round magazine is great for laying down prolonged damage. The FG42 is essentially your sniper rifle that is great for popping heads. The flamethrower is perfect for taking out larger enemies. The grenade launcher turns people to mush. Dynamite and molotovs are incredibly strong at taking out large groups and controlling areas, and even the hatchet can be thrown if you run out of ammo and need some range. CULTIC also offers you some advanced movement in the form of a dash, slide, kick, and a jump, which maybe feels a little too floaty to me personally. I think I would have preferred it if the jump felt a little bit more more heavier. Also, to touch on the dash and slide a little further, I think they're a bit, I'm not gonna say overpowered, but I think they're a little unnecessary. Don't get me wrong, man, I love the movement in this game, and in the later levels the dash really comes in handy, but sometimes I feel like they almost trivialize the combat and overall tone of the game by making you feel like a superhuman or something. I don't know, there's just something about it that sucks me out of the dark and serious tone CULTIC implies, and I could have done without it, especially considering how fast you already move. I even found myself hardly using the dash or slide most of the time because I had no trouble dodging and moving around enemy attacks and projectiles with just the base movement, which is probably also a nod to how well I think this game is balanced in terms of its enemy design and variation. These enemies are tough and engage the player by forcing target prioritization when in a fight, but you also never feel stuck, cornered, or overwhelmed because of how fluid the character movement is, as well as how the enemies telegraph their attacks. You've got your typical fodder that wield axes that aren't much of a threat alone, but in greater numbers they add pressure by making you dodge projectiles and stay out of their melee range. You've got hit scan enemies that can wield pistols, SMGs, and shotguns, this crazy chainsaw dude that throws projectiles and bear traps at you, cheeky snipers that are incredibly hard to see, so you'll need to watch for their muzzle flash, and a variety of spooky fucked up monsters that apply pressure in their own ways, which I won't spoil in this video because I want you to experience it for yourself. So just to clarify, I sometimes feel like the movement is a little too much, but I do see how it's a good addition to the game, if that makes sense. I would just personally like to see a soft cooldown on the dash or something so it isn't infinitely spammable. I think that would slow the game down a little bit, which would help to add pressure whilst in combat. The first thing that caught my eye about CULTIC was its graphics and art design. CULTIC uses a mix of pixelated 2D character models with a fully 3D world, beautiful reload animations, fire effects, a skybox that is breathtaking and unique. Shit man, some of these levels are so beautiful that even the enemies stop to admire them sometimes. The grungy art direction adds so much personality to the world that is only amplified by its incredible sound and level design. CULTIC's world is beautiful to look at and even more of a joy to fight in. Dark, claustrophobic caves and tunnels, grimy, spooky interiors, underground labyrinths filled with lava, vibrant outdoor areas. All these arenas offer unique combat engagements by differing in slight ways. So for example, there might be less cover in a certain area, so you need to use your movement more and focus enemies that can do damage to you from range, whereas others will be more cover based, so you can use stealth to your advantage or pick enemies off with TNT. I've said this a lot in my videos, but I love when a game gives you options on how to approach combat, and that's exactly what CULTIC does. The thing that wraps the game together in a neat little package is its sound design. You've probably heard plenty of people explain it as crunchy because that's exactly what it is. It's retro in the sense where there are intentional audio impurities when it comes to the way the enemies sound, but it's bassy, weighty, and crunchy when you fire a weapon and explode an enemy into mush. The music sets a drony, dark, and immersive tone whilst not overpowering the ambience either. The crunch of the ground beneath you, the sound of people burning alive, the axe splitting their skulls. Something as simple as a lantern gently rocking in the wind is beautifully portrayed in this game and adds to the immersion.
Bro, please, bro, why are you doing?
I could talk about plenty of other things I love about CULTIC, but I try not to spoil the game for others in my reviews, so I'm gonna have to stop myself here. If you're after a retro style FPS that is a little different from the typical fast-paced boomer shooter, then give CULTIC a shot. It's only $10 on Steam and is releasing more chapters in the future, which will be at a similar price. You've got about 4 hours of playtime here in the campaign, with the option to also play a survival mode where you fight off endless waves of enemies. CULTIC is an atmospheric, crunchy, story-driven game that has wonderful combat and level design, and it's one of my favourite games of the year.